Andrew Jenkins.
Thank you. Derek was saying that Bruce Lee was his childhood hero, and it was actually my childhood hero too. We've been swapping stories like all morning. We've got such similar upbringings. I love that quote from Kung Fu Panda. I don't know if you've watched that film. Kung Fu Panda, there's a line in there that kind of says, there's no charge for awesomeness. And there is no charge for awesomeness. You can be as awesome as you want to. I quite like that phrase. Now, listen, I know that you've had some difficult news this week. I understand that. And I hope that you find my talk useful and helpful for that kind of situation. And Derek has been talking this morning about superheroes, hasn't he? And I'm going to talk about everyday superpowers. The two are kind of intrinsically linked here. Now, you'll notice I'm not wearing my underpants on the outside of my trousers, so that's probably a good thing, by the way. And we can all be superheroes in our own way. And likewise, it's the same for our superpowers too. We all have superpowers. We can all access them. We can all develop them. And that's really the theme of what I'm talking about today. And I think in the changing world that we're experiencing, all of us, we're all of us are going through this transition point, which I'll talk about in a while, that I think the new kid on the block is actually our superpowers. And in the new emerging tech economy, that's the kind of posh word for the fourth industrial revolution that the millennials sort of cite quite a lot. I don't think it's not about Bitcoin as the new currency or Libra as the new currency of the new economy. I think it'll be our superpowers. I'm going to talk about why superpowers are important to you personally, at work, and to develop our organisational cultures. All three are important. Along the way, we'll unpack what our superpowers are, and I'll also give you a couple of ways, or two or three ways, how to start accessing your own superpowers today. So I hope you enjoy what I've got to say today. In terms of superheroes, talked about Kung Fu Panda and being awesome. My awesome kind of superhero is a guy called Mr. Foster. Now, Mr. Foster, you won't know him. He was a further education lecturer when I was a student, way back a million years ago, it seems, as an engineering apprentice. That was at Garrett's Green Technical College in East Birmingham, okay, deepest, darkest Birmingham. And Mr. Foster was my kind of hero. Mr. Foster, he changed my life. It took a moment. And he saw something in me he saw something and believed in something in me that I just couldn't see at that time. He reached into me and saw something that was important that I just missed. And I suppose going back before that, when I was at school, a bit like Derek actually, school just missed me by. I just missed out on school. I was incredibly dyslexic at school. I had some real difficulties in keeping up at school. So kind of school missed me by. And I fell off the education conveyor belt at school. And it was Mr. Foster that put me back on the production line and, shook me up and, allowed me to access my superpowers. And I guess, he will never know, probably never knew the profound effect that he had on me on that day in 1980 when he grabbed me by the collar, dragged me out kicking and screaming from his class one day, smacked me up against the corridor wall outside the lecture room and started prodding me in the chest with his finger, okay? Now, this was the 80s, baby. You could do that then, okay? Don't do that now. I don't think it works very well today, but in those days it worked real fine. Did me a lot of good, actually. Really helped me out. And while he's prodding me in the chest and he's telling me to stop messing about in his classroom, that kind of prod. You ever had that prod? That prod in the chest. Stop messing about in my class. And, I remember sort of, this kind of, okay, here we go again. I'm getting the same message, same old stuff. But then he changed his tune. And he kind of said to me, look, Andrew, you're a bright lad, actually. You're one of the brightest lads I've taught. Do something with your life. Don't mess about anymore. You could go to university. Now, the thought of going to university, that was something that had been a real big thing for me. I really wanted to go to university. But I just, at school passed me by, so that just wasn't going to be a possibility for me. And I remember, in my school, and it was a massive school, okay, I think 3 or 4 people in my school year that year, when I left in 1978 or whatever it was, got to university. It was a really poor year. I mean, it's a travesty on education, I think, the 70s. For me anyway, I just kind of missed that by. But here's this guy telling me I could get to university. I could go to university. And I remember sort of travelling on the way home that evening on the train, and I realised that I was standing at a crossroads of choice in my life right there and then, standing up with my hand on the rail, I'm thinking, okay, this can go one or two ways for me. I can either continue messing about at school and be the class clown. I was actually very good at it. I was a great class clown. And, I could entertain a whole class really well, actually. Or, I could buckle down, I could start to work hard, and I could set some goals, and I could be determined and get that place at university. Yeah? Now, that single shift of mindset, and that's all it was for me, was a single shift of mindset. That single shift made all the difference in my life. And that Mr. Foster moment was the thing that did it. It made all the difference for me, that single moment. And it's not about intelligence, ladies and gentlemen. For me, that wasn't a superpower. Now, I know education is a gateway to get to our superpowers. I got that. I actually got that in that moment. I became smart enough in that moment to recognize, actually education is the forward path. It is the way for freedom. However, my superpower was really the ability to be determined, set goals, work hard, and just get on with it. And, you can achieve whatever you want if you set goals clearly for me. And Derek talked about that too. So, it's interesting, isn't it? And we all deserve second chances, don't we? We all deserve a lucky break from time to time, right? And yet, when we hit life speed bumps along the way, when the things happen to us, the issues that we have to face, or difficult things come up in the news or whatever, our inner mind chatter, as Derek talked about earlier, and I'll touch on a little bit later, our inner mind chatter starts to kick in, doesn't it? And we go back to default again, where we kind of say to ourselves, I'm nothing special. I ain't got no superpowers. I can't make the world a different place, a better place. Or so you might think. Because like Mr. Foster, he was no superhero. He would have had his bad days just like we all have. He was no superhero. And yet, just like Mr. Foster, you have the opportunity. You're in that kind of very unique position where you can affect a young person's life, that you can impact their life, in a positive way. You can help them to access their superpowers. Whether that's a light bulb moment that suddenly that youngster gets something for the first time and goes, oh yeah, or is it that you open a door for that young person, that suddenly they see, there's a route through for their life, or they have one of those kind of, perception moment changes, or maybe, a bit like me, it was an attitude shift that, enabled you to access your superpowers. You have that unique opportunity, don't you? And yet the thing is, like Mr. Foster, you might never know the difference that you made in that young person. Excuse me a moment. Cheers, by the way. Gin and tonic. No lemon. Bummer. Okay. So I want to turn our attention to the changing world around us. Let's just hope this works. Aha, okay, good. I think it was Oprah Winfrey that said this. She said, there has never been a moment quite like this one. We stand at a crossroads of profound choice right now. We stand at a crossroads between two different economies, which look a little bit like this. We're standing in this disruption zone right now between the old economy, which has been rising and falling now for quite some time, but on the fall now, from 50 years worth of rising and now falling. And this second curve, which is appearing, which we haven't quite figured out yet, which is about this rising, new emerging tech economy, the new technological economy, the fourth industrial revolution, I think a lot of people are calling it. And we stand in this profound cross-hatched area where we just can't work out what's going on. We haven't figured it out yet. None of us have, actually. Where we're in this kind of, this area of confusion, this zone of uncertainty. A lot of research has been done on this, and it's been called the kind of era of uncertainty. I actually quite like Charles Handy's way of expressing it. He was a writer, a business guru, and futurologist of the 90s, and he predicted this era in the 90s. In the 80s, he started to predict this era and say, in this era, we will see the age of unreason, where people's careers will be upside down. And we won't know what's going on. It's driven by technology. And we'll start to see the emergence of what's called the portfolio economy. I'll come on to that a little bit later. But kind of standing between these two worlds, we're starting to figure out that the rules are different. The rules just aren't the same as what they were with the old economy. The rules of the old economy were quite easy to understand. And in business parlance, this is called playbooks. I don't know if you've heard that expression. The playbook has changed. But what is the playbook? And we're kind of figuring out what it is or what it might not be, and we're kind of better at figuring out what it isn't at the moment. But what it isn't is, in the past economy, we were very reliant, and our identity was wrapped up with what we do as human beings. And I think that's changing in this new economy. It's not about what we do anymore. It's not about our job role, where our identity was very centered, for all of us in this room, was centered very much around the job that we do, the role that we have, the title that we're given. And yet all that seems to be changing. And the other thing that seems to be changing subtly is that, certainly in my parents' era, it was about, you did a job and you did it well, and if you had your health at 65, you could enjoy yourself at that point. Retirement was the nirvana. And you worked towards, your career steadily as you went along. Okay, that seems to be very different today, and if we were lucky along the way, we might pick up a promotion or we get some senior positions as we grow and develop. But in the new economy, it seems that, when you talk to the millennials, they get this much better than the baby boomer generation. There's a lot of baby boomers here today, and I can also see a lot of millennials too, but and there's a very different philosophy here, and the philosophy seems to be about becoming. We're still all working out, well, what does that actually mean? But it seems to be about how we are becoming. That somehow our personal growth is wrapped up in our jobs. It's not about the job that we're doing anymore. It's having multiple jobs, almost. It's about becoming. It's about personal growth. It's about reaching for our dreams and desires today, not waiting for down the line for our dreams and desires. And it's about fulfillment and having a core purpose. These are kind of words that, were just a bit fluffy in the kind of baby boomer era. You just got on and did your job. But these are becoming much more prevalent in the millennium type workplace. And it's about becoming the very best version of you and playing more to our strengths. We hear this sometimes in management speak, in leadership, that it's about playing into our strengths and not worrying about our weaknesses. And yet the old economy was very much based on, well, when you're bad at something, you need to improve that. It's okay being good at something, but you're not good at this or you're not good at that. We need to improve you there. The new economy is changing on that. It's not about what you're bad at, it's about what you're good at and playing to those kind of strengths. And that kind of, so what does that mean? How do we translate that? And I think what we're seeing is that our superpowers, if you like, are around, and I do a lot of coaching around this particular element, where it's about you are your career. These are kind of new words for a lot of us. You are your career. You develop your personal brand. You are your personal branding. So it's much more a personal journey now rather than just a job. I coach a lot of people. I've been running PDX Consulting, my business, for about 15 years, so I've coached a lot of people. And you know what? With the older rules, there were a lot of miserable people that I coached. People just weren't happy in their roles. And yet, when we start to look at our careers in terms of, well, can I take control? Can I be the control of my career rather than being controlled by an entity or an organisation? Can I have control? And I think that's where this new economy is heading. You are much more in control, which takes a heck of a lot of responsibility too. It's down to you now, rather than down to the organisation. You are your career. And I think there's a lot of motivation in that, actually. When you get your head around that, it actually is quite liberating. And an analogy to that, I guess, a very pertinent analogy, in the older template of work, you worked towards a pension plan, didn't you? And the company contributed to that pension plan. And at the end, when you retire, you then retire on this salary scheme pension. And yet today, it's very much about having a portable pension that you put into, but also the people that you're working with, you get them to put into it too. That's very much the kind of analogy of where our careers are heading. That this whole thing about the portfolio career is becoming very real. Actually, I'll talk about that a little bit later. And so, these are a kind of similar principles as well that we're seeing in our workplaces. I want to talk about organisational culture just for a little while. And this is an infographic put together by Dr. Rabina Chatham. She's a friend of mine. And she developed this model. For the dot-com era. That was the third industrial revolution that happened in the 90s. The dot-com era was an incredible time of technology growth. We all lived through that. Most of us in this room will probably remember that. And I'll come on to this model in a moment, but I just want to describe something about organisational culture for a moment. In the old sort of rules of the old economy, leadership didn't really define organisational culture. It kind of just arrived by default. It was kind of an unwritten rule in some ways that the culture just defined itself. And today that's changing quite significantly, I think, in the new economy. And so we ended up with kind of, because we're all kind of involved with the human condition, we ended up with these kind of three classic stereotypical behaviour types. And this is what the foxes and the baboons and the sheep represent. I'll talk about this now. So on the x-axis, you've got reading people and reading situations and being good or bad at that. And then on the y-axis here, you've got the ability to carry responsibility. And the kind of unwritten rules of behaviour. Now, this is about behaviour. It's not about skill. It's not about competency. It's about behaviours. They're very deliberately placed into these kind of stereotype boxes. You either kind of develop a fox-like behaviour, which was, if you were clever, you would get on by outplaying, outsmarting your colleagues or, other businesses. So this is this fox-like behaviour that's about sort of exploiting other people's weaknesses. It's very much based on I win, you lose type philosophy. Okay, and I think we can recognise these in our workplaces. Likes to win, quite insecure but well defended, charming. A very self-centred behaviour. We see this a lot in negotiations as well, particularly political negotiations. Quite interesting. So that's the foxes. That's kind of outsmarting, outplaying people. But then you get the kind of baboon type behaviour, which is it's kind of I want to be in my comfort zone and leave me alone type thing. I know I don't fit in here, but I'm moody and grumpy about it. So they're kind of grumpy people, if you like. They're conspires with the powerless. They emotionally don't read the situation very well, haven't developed their emotional resilience particularly well, and see things very black and white and get grumpy because of it, but don't do anything about it. And then you get the kind of sheep-like behaviours, and this is about compliance, really. It's easier to get on and comply with my boss's wishes or the wishes of the company because it's just easier. So, wide-eyed, as it were. Too busy to network, though, and doesn't spend any time building alliances, but complies pretty well with the work situation. And these were the kind of behaviour types that defined our older organisations. And yet, in today's world, in today's changing economy, in today's changing world, we need a different, smarter way of working. And that's what these dolphin behaviours are kind of indicating here. And these are superpowers in themselves, okay, these dolphin behaviours. And this is about taking account of others, listening, being empathetic, open and sharing. It's about creating community. We hear this word quite a bit, don't we? And networking, being a strong networker. And being creative and imaginative. 20 years ago, we wouldn't have talked about creativity as the way we're talking about it today. In today's economy, creativity is becoming a prized thing. Where beforehand, if you were creative, well, you were just going to become, that doesn't earn a lot of money, doesn't get you anywhere. Well, in today's world, it gets you a long way. Because creativity is becoming, again, the new kid on the block almost. And this behaviour is about win-win. It's about I need to win, you need to win. We all need to win out of this. It's not about win-lose type behaviours. And I just thought for a moment, what I'd like you to do is to just do a little bit of interaction on your tabletops at the moment. So I'd like you just in a moment just to kind of get into pairs or triplets, whatever's easiest around your table, okay? And I just want you to spend just a moment or two, talking to each other about just a quick discussion. It's only going to be about 3 minutes on just what do you observe, what do you notice, what are your thoughts, what are your experiences of these foxes, these baboons, sheep, dolphin type model. What do you recognise about it? And be honest, where's your default and where do you aspire to? So I'll give you 3 minutes to do that. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Well, there's certainly a lot of energy in the room, that's for sure. Okay, thanks. Just settle down for a moment. We haven't got time for feedback, I'm afraid, although it'd take forever with 800 people. But many people, when I do this exercise loads, I work with, this is a model that I use with leaders and teams quite a bit. And it's amazing what discussion comes about. And often what turns up here is that people recognise these kind of behaviours. They're kind of, well, if I'm honest, I kind of see all three of those. And very much, if you want to get on in the world, in the older world anyway, it's certainly about these fox-like behaviours. And I hope that when you look at those dolphin behaviours, that's something to aspire to. And I think from an organisation perspective, one of the responsibilities of leadership today is about defining our cultures and defining them right. And there's a lot to be said for deliberately defining a culture where actually we can design cultures where everybody matters. It's not just about status or those at the top get and those at the bottom don't. The times are changing. We're very much about everybody matters, and that's where these dolphin type behaviours, these superpowers, are important. And John Vincent later on is going to start to introduce values and your organisational values a little bit later on, so I won't steal his thunder on that. So that'll be over to you, John. Okay. So one of my favourite films is this film here, The Matrix. If you haven't seen this film, go and see it. Who doesn't like The Matrix? If you've seen it, it's a brilliant film. In The Matrix, this is a film about control, choice, going away from an old world to a new world. Okay. And the protagonist is a guy called Neo. And his teacher is a kind of John the Baptist type character. His teacher is teaching him about soft skills and, about superpowers. So where Morpheus says to Neo, look, this is the choice point right now. You can take the blue pill and you can wake up in your bed, nothing changes, same old. Or you can take the red pill, you wake up in Wonderland, everything changes, and you see how far the rabbit hole goes. I love that kind of expression. And I've drawn this model here. I think this model's brilliant, probably because I drew it. And this represents the blue circles are the blue pill and the red circles are the red pill. And the blue pill is a little bit like our comfort zone and our fear zones. And Derek touched on this too. And our comfort zones and our fear zone, this is about where our thoughts and our feelings around our fears, our deficiencies, and our past histories, particularly our past histories, start to form into the kind of stories of our life. And if it's centered around blue pill type, comfort zone, fear zone type stuff, then that narrative ends up being quite negative as time goes on. And it's kind of sticky, it has a very sticky side to it. And it keeps us stuck in that comfort zone. And part of the reason for that is our negative inner mind chatter. And Derek touched on this too. This is really important, actually. How we talk to ourselves is massively important. And yet most of us don't give any credit for when we talk to ourselves in bad ways. We need to talk to ourselves much more positively. So things like, I'm rubbish at this. I'm no good at X, Y, Z. I'm not clever enough. I'm not smart enough. People don't like me. People don't love me. Not feeling worthy. Feeling a failure. Then these things aren't real. Okay, but in our heads we make them up to be real. And when our head starts to work on this, our biochemistry becomes part of it. It produces lots of cortisol, which is a stress hormone. So actually it feels real, but these things aren't real. They are just constructs in our mind. And we have the choice to move past those. And the thing with our inner mind chatter is that it kind of has a knock-on effect elsewhere, that we become quite defensive. We start to make excuses for ourselves. It's everybody else. It's not us. It's everybody else. It's the economy, stupid. It's where we are. So we get affected by events quite substantially, when we're stuck in this comfort zone, fear zone stuff. And we feel the need for safety and protection. And I call this the zone of the mediocrity of meh. That's really for all of us. And the interesting thing is that, we're all partial to this. This isn't just you. We're all, part of our brain is very much built around this principle. I think it was Professor Stephen Peters who wrote The Chimp Paradox. I don't know if you've read that book. It's a brilliant book if you haven't read it. And he talks about this brain chimp, this chimp brain that we have, this negative chimp that lives in our brain. I call it the downstairs part of our brains, okay? We've all got this downstairs part of our brain. It's part of our basic survival, okay? However, we've also got all the tooling and all the programming to move beyond that, to move into our stretch zone, to learn and grow and get to our superpowers. We all have that ability, okay? We all do. And it's a little bit like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You come across Maslow's hierarchy of needs? Yeah, we all know it, don't we? It's like a triangle, isn't it? And on the bottom of that, you've got Wi-Fi, right? I love that. Wi-Fi, that's like the basic need these days. Actually, the bottom of that is the comfort zone and fear zone. And what's at the very top of that triangle? Can you remember? Yeah, self-actualization. Okay. Now, our self-actualization represents our superpowers in this model. And it's the in-between zone that I'm now going to talk about. How do we get from base camp to climb up into, the higher echelons of self-actualization? How do we get to those superpowers? One of those is through choice, and we just talked about that. That's red pill, blue pill. And the red pill here, if you remember Morpheus said about the red pill, is you take the red pill, you wake up, you stay in Wonderland, and you see how far the rabbit hole goes. You don't know what's ahead of you, but it becomes exciting. And this is about cranking up your soft skills. Okay, now, when we hear the word soft skills, a lot of you might have come from the baby boomer generation and thought these were fluffy and namby-pamby. This is so far from the truth. Our soft skills are the enabler to get to our superpowers. We can't do it without developing our soft skills. We have to crank up our soft skills. And these are powerful attributes that we can all learn. We can all do this, and by the way, we can all improve them too. Yeah? And our soft skills are about building resilience, first off. First basic soft skill, building resilience, becoming adaptable to setbacks, dealing with conflict, solving problems, being able to manage time. That's another belief system. People don't think they're good at managing time. It's just a construct. Having compassion. This is important. It's not about being nice to people necessarily. People think soft skills are all about being nice to people. It is that, but it's a whole lot more. Building trust, influencing other people around us. These are soft skills of the future, and they matter a lot. Now, the thing is, when we start to develop this learning zone, when we crank up our learning zone, when we crank up our soft skills, what that does is quite profound, actually. What it does is enables you to get beyond the elastic band effect, the rubber band effect of our comfort zone and our fear zone. We start to build capacity to start to move beyond that, to stretch away from it. And when we start to build that more and more and more, then we actually create more and more bandwidth in our mind as our brain starts to adapt to the upstairs part of our brain. So there's a neuroscience piece to this as well. So when we start to use the upstairs part of our brain, these neurocortexes here, they're very powerful, and we've got infinite amount of choices that we can make when we start to engage these rather than the downstairs part of our brain. It's so much more powerful. And also, this is where our happy chemicals live. You know, these things like dopamine, serotonin, endorphins, oxytocin. These are powerful motivational chemicals that help to create our biochemistry to be in the right place. And also we get that spike of testosterone, male and female. You know, that spike of testosterone is really important because it flushes out cortisol. And cortisol is a stress hormone that creates our fear zone, our comfort zone. And so our biochemistry is involved with this stuff. You know, where our bodies change. You know, we become more assertive. There's been a lot of research by Professor Amy Cuddy in Harvard University that talks about the real effect of these chemicals and how they affect us so profoundly. So it's not just going on in your head, it's going on in the head and our bodies. And so when we reach our superpowers, this is where we kind of explore our dreams and desires. This isn't namby-pamby stuff. You know, we have to have courage to explore our dreams and desires, where we start to think about a sense of purpose. You know, what is your purpose? What is the core reason for you turning up for work? Not just to get paid, but if it is to get paid, what does that do for you? What's the purpose for money? And it's about inventing yourself around your work. Back to your career is about you. And making a difference. You know, we can all make a difference in this world. We don't just have to turn up and just do our job and get paid. You know, actually one of the elements of superpowers is that we want to make a difference in the world. We want to serve the world differently. We want to make the world a better place. And that's where our superpowers come in. When you start to access this is the kind of consciousness mindset we get involved with. It's no longer just about turning up anymore. Where we define our organisational values purposefully, and John's going to talk about that later. We become the best version of you. You know, and why shouldn't we be that? You know, who wouldn't want to become the best version of who they're meant to be? I don't get that. You know, why wouldn't you want to be that kind of person? So this is about reaching for our higher self. We all have that higher self. And so our soft skills matter, ladies and gentlemen. They will define the future of work. There is no doubt about it. As the technological economy starts to crank up more and more and more, we all know, you know, lots of jobs are going to go missing, you know, in the economy because they're going to be done by artificial intelligence, by robots and stuff like that. But the good news is there's more jobs to come that we don't even know about just yet. And a lot of top influencers are citing their soft skills as superpowers. You know, so you ain't alone in this. You know, it's not just me talking about this. I've been banging on about this for 15 years now, and I think that message is starting to gain a lot of traction. And high-performance teams require soft skills. And you know, when I'm talking to leaders and teams and I'm working with them, these are kind of some of the themes that I talk about. And the thing is, ladies and gentlemen, we can all improve them. None of us are done yet. You know, we're just at the tip of the iceberg of understanding soft skills. But don't think they're namby-pamby. They're not fluffy. You know, this is the future of where we're heading. Humanity-wise, and our consciousness needs to develop and take that step change. And in the new economy, you know, and I think this is true today, you know, difficult things will continue to happen. And they will continue to happen at a faster and faster rate. You know, we're seeing change curves happen more and more and more regularly. You know, in the 80s, I remember seeing the first people made redundant that I'd ever seen, you know, and that was like, that was a very rare thing. And then in the 90s, this started to, you know, to increase. And so we need to build resilience, and that's where our soft skills come in. We need to build resilience because life is changing. You know, we will hit speed bumps along the way, all of us will. And there will be a bigger demand for soft skills, as I've said. I've just been talking about that. That's not just your responsibility. You know, we have a dual responsibility. As leaders, you have a responsibility to define cultures that help us to define soft skills for ourselves, to be part of who we are, and our young people too. So when they take courses, it's also about understanding the soft skills that are involved in your career. Okay, so they're important. And our workplace jobs won't be forever. You know, we will have to, remember the change curve that I showed earlier on? We will be inventing our own change curves because, you know, in further education particularly, you've been kind of shielded a lot from this, but in the private sector, you know, we've seen change curve after change curve after change curve. People are reinventing their careers all the time. They have to, because actually that job no longer exists anymore suddenly. So, you know, we will have to define new change curves for ourselves. We have to take responsibility for that. But equally, you know, there will be an exponential rise in portfolio careers. And what I mean by that is doing multiple jobs. And this might sound a bit strange to us that have just got one job. But actually in my own, you know, last 15 years, I've run a portfolio existence and I've loved it actually. I can't be happier. You know, one day I might be doing some content writing for a company that I'm working for, a startup that I'm working for. Another day I might be working with PDX Consulting and doing some leadership work, or I might be presenting for another company. You know, I've got lots of different careers that all add up to my life, and actually I really enjoy that, and I think young people will experience much more a portfolio type existence as they go through their careers, and it will be their careers, and they'll be pocketing that experience and doing something with it, and they will be on top of their game. You know, I feel on top of my game that, you know, I'm doing all of these different things and I'm loving it. You know, we can be on top of our game here by doing these multiple portfolio careers, and I think that is the future, particularly for our young people. Okay. And, you know, I think from further education perspective, what that means is there's going to be more training. You know, this is the bonus for you. Bonus, you know, actually there will be more training, there will be more opportunities to help tool up young people for the future. And I think the future is further education. And I'm pretty sure that at some point we're going to have to pump more money politically into our further education establishments, because actually that's where the future is for young people. So I hope that you've had some insight into this. And what I wanted to do was you know, just go back to soft skills just for a moment and superpowers. And, you know, when we access our superpowers, we get that kind of, it increases our confidence. You know, we feel happier in ourselves when we access our superpowers. We start to gain a positive outlook on life, and our language changes too. And this is important. You know, we kind of have a language, rather than, well, I can't do this and I'm no good at this and rubbish at that. You know, actually our body language changes, our confidence changes, and our language shifts to I can do, I will do, I am going to. It's very much goal-driven type language. And I wanted to finish with that actually. This is a slide I've put together. There's a video behind this, which I'm going to play in a moment. I want you to just, you know, listen to this, watch the language, just read it as it's going across the screen. It's called What If? And this is some examples of superpower language that I wrote about in my first book. So this is the superpower zone in action. I'll leave it with you. Can you play the video, please? Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. That video you can find on YouTube. I put it together. Search it under What If, Andrew Jenkins. You'll find it. Please play it to your colleagues if they're not here. Yeah. Thank you very much. I've enjoyed working with you this morning. Thank you.